I made a future compass containing all possible futures of the America-Canada conflict. On one side of the compass, we have Canada stands, which are futures where Canada does all right, or even thrives within this conflict. And on the other side, we have American expansion, where America annexes Canada, or stuff goes bad for Canadians in some way. Near the top, we have uneventful futures, where nothing much is going on, and at the bottom, things are happening. But let's start in the dead center. This is the future I call the perfect trade. In this universe, Alberta, which is the most right wing of the Canadian provinces, joins up with America. They get annexed. And in exchange, Canadians get California. The idea here is that Americans love complaining about those liberals in California, and Canada is perceived as being more liberal in general. Meanwhile, Alberta is seen as very similar to the, Wild West cowboy style that Americans would like. This is the right mix of something happening, but it's not a huge amount happening, and it's not a huge win or loss for either party. On a similar note, we have the blue state refugee future. This is a very idealized map of Canada. Canadians are super liberal and super blue states. And, under the Orange Man presidency, surely all of these blue states will secede from America and actually join Canada. The most extreme version of this kind of provincial/state swap situation is the continental-wide national divorce. Some of you may have heard of this concept of the national divorce in America, that the red states and the blue states should just make their own country. This takes it even further and includes Canada in that equation. So basically, all the conservative provinces join up with all the red states in America, and all the liberal provinces join up with all the liberal states in America. This is far center in the something happens direction, but not a clear win for either party. Moving on to the nothing ever happens plus the Canada stands part of the equation. This one's easy. This is just like literally nothing happens. This is just a map of how Canada and America currently exist right now. And, you could assume that this would just continue. Leading into this, though, we have a very interesting possible future where Trump just forgets about the tariffs. Maybe he has dementia now and he just it slips his mind and nothing comes of it. Or a more charitable interpretation of the whole Trump going back and forth on these tariffs things is that it was actually a 4D chess negotiating tactic by the mastermind Trump, which would lead to nothing fucking happening, obviously, but maybe with some sort of benefit for America in that sense. Then we have the rally around the flag effect, perma-liberal victory. The liberals have won 3 terms. If they win a 4th, that's going to be a real long stretch of the status quo center-left party being in power. But the liberals are super on the rise in the polls right now, which is interesting because they were losing hard before Trump put the tariffs on. So he sort of inadvertently, made the conservatives at super risk of losing this election. Due to the rally around the flag effect, which is when a country or a nation is threatened, they tend to support the incumbent party when stuff like this happens, which is why the liberals have been gaining in popularity. And further on the American side, we have Trump seizes all the Canadian fed for himself. Moving down here, we've got the interprovincial trade barrier removal. In Canada, there is a lot of trade barriers between the provinces, and there's a lot of talk right now about removing those barriers so that there can be more trade within Canada so that we rely less on America for our imports and exports. As you can see, international trade is 66% and interprovincial trade is 36%. Which is pretty crazy. I mean, someone like Peter Zeihan makes the argument that Canada is not even a country because it has more trade outside of it than it does even within its own borders. And over here near the center, we have the McCulloch BLT European-style Trade and Border Agreement. J.J. McCulloch is really trying to popularized this term between Canada and America called the BLT, a bilateral labor and trade agreement. And it's like a really close relationship where Canada and America just get along really well and they start trading with each other. And, you can go through the borders between the two countries without getting molested quite as much. And every day, J.J. McCulloch takes more and more L's in hoping for that to happen. Moving further into the something happens category, we've got NATO defends Canada. In this kind of world, Canada sort of joins the free world and NATO defends them. Maybe Canada gets nukes. And we have the War of 1812 Part 2, where the badass Canadians fought back the wretched American Yankees. Which is to say, maybe the British will come and save our ass. Following the War of 1812 Part 2, which we definitely won, we have the Kanzuk British Emperor Restoration. Kanzuk is Canada, New Zealand, and the UK. This is sort of a British Commonwealth restorationist position, which of course leads to total British victory in this universe where the British Empire is fully restored and we all are under a monarchy. And this universe, of course, leads us to Soy face Curtis Yarvin crying, "No, that's not what I meant by neo-monarchy!" This joke is very funny for about 6% of my audience, but I'm not going to explain it. And then, of course, we have some future where Canada does get nukes and is somehow against America, and we have some sort of World War III situation. We also have post-climate change, autarkic, tropical paradise, global superpower, where because of climate change, Canada becomes a lush, beautiful land with lots of resources, and becomes the richest place on the earth, and somehow doesn't get, annexed or taken advantage of by a bigger nation. And they do great. And they become autarkic, which means they are self-sufficient and all the trade is within the country. But before we continue with that, a word from our sponsor.
Hey guys, Dreg here. As you know on this channel, I love drugs. I actually named myself Drug because I love drugs so much. And one of my favorite drugs of all time is marijuana. I love smoking it, I love sniffing it. But here's the problem. Smoking it, that's no good for your lungs. That's why you gotta try 5-CBD gummies! Yeah! These gummies will get you fucked up, boy! Unless you don't want to get fucked up, in which case you would go for the 5-CBD chill, which doesn't fuck you up quite as much. This is more for when you're trying to chill. And the Surge, that's for when you want to get shit done. And then the Vibes one, Vibes. This is more a middle ground between the two. And you can get this shipped to your door by using the link in my description. If, and only if, you're 21 years and older. That's a free $50 deal if you just pay shipping. If you're not 21, you don't even drink water. It's too psychoactive for you. But as soon as you hit 21, do smoke as much marijuana as possible, especially if it's likely to induce a psychotic break. Now watch as I go to town on these things.
Use my link to get a free 10-pack of 5 Surge, Vibe, or Chill. Just pay shipping. Must be 21 plus.
Moving to some less favorable Canadian futures, we have the tariff-induced Canuck collapse. Its economy is already not doing very well, and this is kind of the thing that pushes it into a recession or even a depression. If that does happen, you could see it leading into a sort of Canadian balkanization sort of situation, where all the different provinces split up, some join America, some become their own nations. Canadian balkanization may lead to Indigenous Wakanda, where maybe some parts of Canada rewild, and the Indigenous people reclaim their land, and maybe they build some advanced utopia there. And then you have the opportunistic Quebec separatism future coming out of that, because Quebec, maybe they use this opportunity to get on out of there. And coming out of this, we have total Quebec victory, where Quebec annexes America. And stemming from that, we have a sort of horseshoe theory between Alberta and Quebec, once seen to be mortal rivals, actually agreeing that the balkanization should happen because you have a pan-separatist Quebrexit unity. Quebrexit, of course, being a term I invented for unity between Wexit, which is the Western Canadian separatist movement, and Quebec exit, which is just Quebec nationalism. Back to things going bad for Canada, we have American peacekeeping and humanitarian aid, heavy quotes. This is when Canada falls into disrepair and the Americans have to come in and help us out, which finally leads us to the moment you've all been waiting for, the Day of the Rake. The Day of the Rake is the day where Americans will finally rake in those leaves and make them a part of the greater American empire. This future implies sort of breaking them first, using the tariffs to weaken them, and then, when they're on their knees, then you take them in, instead of having them come in more of like a willing nature before you have to do all of that. And of course, the worst case scenario for Canadians after the Day of the Rake is second-class citizen Gazada neo-apartheid, where the Canadian citizen is literally Palestinian, and you see similar human rights abuses to Canadians, as they're kept in conditions of wretched squalor, and are branded with leaves on their foreheads. Here we have the cartels take over North America after we fail to heed Trump's warning. Trump, one of his reasons for doing these tariffs is that there's an overflow of fentanyl coming into the United States. And in this future, that's not just either delusional or he's just blatantly lying about that to have an excuse to put the tariffs in because he wants to annex us. In this world, that's actually true. And the Canadian cartels, they go and they take over all of North America. And we should have listened to Trump about this. And then in this future, the scramble for the Arctic becomes the most important political event. Who's going to take control of the Arctic? And, this is all a strategy from America to get better bases in order to claim more of the Arctic as it melts more and more. Same thing with Greenland, obviously. By the way, this whole thing is happening because of climate change. What happens when your house is full of canned food and you don't have any guns, but then your neighbor has no food and a bunch of guns, and then it's the apocalypse? What happens? And then the world where the Canadian economy does collapse. Here's a future where Canada becomes actually communist, The government right now is offering a lot of aid and support for people that lose their jobs or face economic hardship because of these tariffs. And so you could imagine, this is what my mom is really worried about, that the big government keeps expanding and everyone becomes super reliant on the government, and then you get communism, and then Canada becomes a Chinese vassal state. But the woke among you would know that's already the case. And that's about it. If you want to download this map and look at it closer, it's on the Patreon, as well as another future compass about Ukraine versus Russia, including the future Hyperborea restored, as well as a third future compass I made about high casualty versus low casualty and high technology versus low technology future of war compass. Did I miss any epic futures? Let me know in the comments below.